The shortest distance between two people is a story. The infinite complexity, yet quiet simplicity of these words is striking. We are known to one another through the stories we choose to share in safety. Today, I will shorten the distance between us, between my family and yours, between my journey and that which you're traveling yourself. My words are a portrait of my life's journey, woven together like the threads of a colorful tapestry with those of my oldest son, a visible transgender person of elementary age who boldly lives his daily humanity. For true visibility to emerge, I wish my son were standing on this stage, for then you would truly know his brilliance. But he is young, so I fiercely protect his name and image publicly. His absence from this stage is highly problematic then, because as a cisgender woman, I never have the right to speak for anyone within the trans community, nor for my child, whose own voice is more powerful than most adults I know. He will come of age one day soon and speak his truth directly to you. So for now, it is my responsibility to speak alongside him in the places he cannot yet be, so that our story may be known. So, my kid and I co-wrote parts of this talk for you today to center two critical things that we have come to realize. That first, in the act of asserting his identity as a transgender person at the age of 8 and 9 and now 10, he is often rendered invisible by the world around him. His growing circumstance of living a life of visible invisibility. And second, realizing that love, and not just any love, but love of the radical kind, is the only way to move forward to ensure that he and his trans peers safely live a life of full visibility, our notion of visible love. I invite you to grapple with the notion of visible invisibility, centering always the reality that rendering groups of children invisible is a dangerous and problematic event to their lives. When folks look at my son, they see a young boy. The transgender part of his identity is largely invisible. At the age of 10, he presents in ways that the world often thinks he should. He visibly blends into the sea alongside his classmates. And truthfully, he likes it this way. But what is essential to him, his identity as a transgender person, is incredibly important to him. In his own words, I want people to know I'm a transgender boy. I just don't want them to judge me for it and think I'm sensitive. I don't know why, but sometimes I like to hide that aspect of my identity. I don't want that to control my life. In his act of becoming more visible with those around him, he's learning that there is a cost, especially with his peers, in the form of verbal and physical assaults, ignoring and isolating, and excluding him from groups, all realities he's endured in these past years. But thankfully, alongside him, he's navigated with a group of friends who've shown compassion and true friendship as steadfast kid accomplices. By keeping this part of his identity invisible, though, for safety, it contributes to the shameful political agenda of America that would seek to erase him completely. Our current administration, supported by the Secretary of Education, has provided language to the Department of Education to dismiss cases of transgender discrimination in facilities based on gender identity in our public schools. Adding on to this cowardly discrimination against our transgender youth is the movement to censor books with transgender characters from our elementary schools. This September in Rockland, California, an uprising arose when a kindergarten teacher read I Am Jazz, a book about a transgender child, to her students in June. Also in September, Alex Gino's George, a Stonewall Award-winning book about a transgender child's transition, wasn't included on the master list given to all public elementary schools in Wichita, Kansas, because the supervisor of library media said the book, quote, contained language and references not appropriate for young children. Author Alex Gino responded by raising money and donating their book to every public elementary school in Wichita, Kansas. Before you say you agree with such censorship, I invite you to look at me as I gaze upon you in an attempt to shorten the distance between us with our story. I am a mother of a 10-year-old boy. Should he not be able to have books read to him in a school within which he sees himself and his identity reflected? Should what is essential to him be erased by the narrow choices of those in power? As a mother and an educator, if we continue to paint a picture of the way in which the world works, including the identities of those that inhabit it, and continue to remain silent about the fact that transgender people exist in our world, this essentially erases a part of my child's identity. In essence, it's erasure of personhood. That is a violent act against children. Poet and essayist Adrienne Rich puts it this way: when someone with the authority, say, of a teacher, describes the world and you are not in it, there is a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked into a mirror and saw nothing. Yet you know you exist, and those like you, that this is a game done with mirrors. My kid, though, says it best of all, quote, I would be angry if there were no books with transgender characters in my school. Then no one would know what it's like to be a transgender kid, and I would be all alone. If people didn't talk about and read about transgender characters, then they wouldn't know my world, and I would be alone. It's complicated, yet quite simple, just as life is simultaneously complex. My son wants to be known through the stories he chooses to share in safety with those around him about his humanity, so that the distance between he and his peers may be shortened. It has been a few years now that my child and I have struggled to see him reflected in the world around us, in our community, and in his school district, and not merely represented and included, but privileged and valued for his authentic self. And I have struggled to understand the pervasive adult mindset characterized by fear of engaging children in conversations about gender diversity in our schools. My life's work has become walking alongside educators of this nation who are boldly, decisively, and unapologetically working to create more inclusive, just, and equitable spaces for all children. Courageously speaking up when those of us around us choose to remain silent is one way we can shift this national narrative characterized by oppressive silence towards our transgender youth. Courageous actions of speaking about the fact that transgender people, transgender children, known and unknown to us, exist and thrive in our world, in our communities, in our places of worship, in our schools, in our classrooms, on our basketball courts, in our art studios, in our neighborhoods, in our homes. Taking action to speak about gender diversity while mindfully using inclusive texts in our schools, in our classrooms, in our libraries, in our homes is one of the most socially just acts that we can take as adults and educators in our communities. We show the radical aspect of visible love in my son's own words when we, quote, hug and say, "I choose love today," every morning. When we write speeches like this to bravely share our story. When my mom goes to schools and works with teachers to show love to all kids and writes about it, that's her doing visible love. We also enact the radical aspect of visible love when we show patient compassion with those around us. When my son is misgendered with the wrong pronouns and his dead name, and I whisper to him, "I'm sorry, love," and he says to me, "It's okay, Mom." The depth of compassion in his heart rivals that of most adults. To us, enacting patient compassion with those around us as they work to shift their hearts and minds more expansively is love enacted. Poet Adrienne Rich argues that it takes some sense of soul and not just individual strength, but collective understanding to demand to be seen and heard. It is our collective responsibility to work toward creating a more inclusive, just, and equitable world for all of our children. This responsibility begins with each of us. So now that the distance between my son and I, between you and I, has been shortened, my child and I invite you to walk alongside us in actionable, visible love. Thank you.